Welcome, colleagues, to our 5th risk management event. And again, it's a digital event. In 2021, we started with this event in COVID times with a digital conference, and we decided to retain the digital format. And we're happy to have you here. We is me, Matthias Beck, and my colleague, Katharina Wochele. So we would like to give you a few organizational details before we start. We will record this session. We already told you that in the invitation, but just for your information, we will record the session and make it available digitally later on. And if there are any questions, please ask them in the chat during the event, and later on we will have a Q&A session at the end of this event. So then you can ask your questions in person. This time you can actually unmute your phones later during the Q&A session. So let's have a look at the agenda. We do have a great mix of updated slides with new information, but there isn't really anything totally new, and I think that's good news in this field of expertise. So we'll look at the challenges and the current status. We'll look at the further development of the risk management process. So that's going to be an update on what we are currently doing, what we are doing to achieve a new risk management audit standard. Then Katharina will talk a bit about the process at the company level. She will talk about the evaluation of the risk reports from the last risk management cycle. Then Clara Schlindwein will talk a bit about the focus risks in the field of compliance. And after her, Luise Schulmeier from the sustainability team will talk a bit about news and all the information regarding sustainability requirements. Then we'll share an outlook with you, what we still have to do at the end of the year and at the beginning of next year. And at the end of the event, as I said before, you will have the opportunity to ask questions live, or we will try to answer all the questions that basically came up in the chat during our event. So let's kick off with the first agenda item, the current status. What is our situation in the process? So currently 174 companies are participating in the risk management process. You know from the past that we are onboarding companies year after year once they meet the participation criteria, or once they volunteer, or when they are nominated by the responsible EVP, SVP, or the KF member. So the criteria are still the same. You can see them here. Either it's 32.12 million in annual sales, all manufacturing companies, and of course those nominated by the KF or EVPs. So we added another 8 companies this year. Then the notorious process wheel or process cycle that you might have already seen. We're refining this every year, and the process starts every year with the risk workshop, and that's how the process ends as well. We had the 17th risk workshop of the Central Management Board in February of this year, and this goes to show that the Central Management Board is committed to risk management. So they take 3 hours out of their schedule to talk about the risk situation of the company, and they get basically all the information from us. We report on all material risks that have been reported in the risk management process, and in this workshop we define the focus risks for the next risk management cycle, which will kick off the next risk management cycle in the coming year. So currently we are in the info to the risk managers step. We had 9 information events for risk managers last year, but that also included training courses as well. This year we won't have any courses, but of course the offer stands. If you have any specific questions or ideas, please feel free to reach out to Katharina or me, ask your questions on the process. Then that's the kickoff for the risk workshops on the risk reports at the companies. Ideally, we'll do a risk workshop with the companies, and again, we're still offering to support you with materials or by personally helping with these risk workshops on site. So this year, we've already received a few inquiries, and I think we will hold around 8 local risk workshops at national companies. Last year, it was just 3, I think. The next step is your risk reports through the CIS. The deadline is the 30th of June. And I would like to really commend you on this. In the past few years, the discipline has improved significantly. With a few exceptions, I can say that the 30th of June is a good deadline that's being adhered to by many companies. And last year, we tried to respond to all companies that submitted a report. So we gave them feedback on their risk inventory, whether it's in line with the process requirements, whether there are any improvements needed. So we had a lot of contact with you over the past few months. So once the risk report has been completed, then the EVPs and the SVPs will continue. They will review your risk reports, check them for plausibility, and at the same time, the EVPs and the SVPs are asked to create a risk inventory for their entire unit. That's basically the end of the reporting cycle, and we will then consolidate all reports, evaluate them, and in September, we will report that in turn to the audit committee of the advisory board, reporting on any significant changes and the development of risks, and then the risk cycle will start all over again with the risk workshop of the board. So in the process, the internal group auditing team and the IT security team will conduct audits and checks, and when they are doing on-site audits, they will do a plausibility check of the risk inventory, check whether the risks are valued properly, and maybe whether there's the one or the other thing to improve. So we do have a very close connection with our colleagues from this corporate sustainability team. We identify focus risks together. We contributed to the sustainability report. We contributed to the double materiality assessment. Then maybe one more piece of information. I just mentioned that the risk reports of the EVPs and SVPs, with these reports, we will attend the status appointments that these EVPs and SVPs have with their KF members. So it's a 10 to 15-minute session. The KF member will look at the risk inventory. We will look at the risk inventory. There will be feedback for the SVPs and EVPs about the valuation of the risk inventory and whether there are any specific risks missing or maybe reported too much. So in the past, we did attend 27 of these checks. This year, we will integrate 6 new EVPs and SVPs. So just as you, they will get some information on the process and how it's being conducted. So that was that. Then let's move on to the next topic, the further development of the process. So this slide, of course, looks a bit crowded at the first glance, but we just wanted to show you what we are currently doing, what we require as we adapt the risk management process to achieve or to comply with a new audit standard. So there is a new standard introduced by the Institute of Public Auditors in Germany. It's called PS 981, and we had to adjust the risk management process of the work group to implement these recommendations. So there were a few priorities that we had to change over. The red ones are, of course, the most important ones, and they are already done. Then there are some still in implementation, and some are still being planned. And why am I mentioning that here? Because you will feel the impact of these recommendations, and you might have felt that last year, because suddenly the risk inventory included a net risk amount or potential loss amount, so that you had to look at individual measures more closely. You had to assess the risk, whether there are any influencing factors between individual risks, and maybe a few other factors as well. But what was really important in this recommendation was that we have to define a risk strategy at the group level, and together with this risk strategy, we had to basically calculate the risk resistance, so to speak, of the entire worth group. And that was also based on the liquidity of the worth group. So we defined what risks the worth group can carry, what potential losses the worth group can actually withstand. And this basically translates into the risk that the worth group is willing and able to take into account or to accept. And then we assessed these net risks, we aggregated these net risks and basically calculated a total risk amount. That doesn't really affect you, of course, as individual companies, but it goes to show that there is a lot of requirements that we need to implement as a group. And for us, of course, the overall target is to be ready at the end of the year so that when we're audited for the 2025 fiscal year, we will get a positive grade for the risk management system of the worth group by the auditors. I think that's everything I wanted to say on this slide. So let's move on. You might be familiar with that. That's the risk universe, as we call it. It's very small. You don't have to be able to read all the individual risk items. What's important here is that you see that we're developing this further every year. And I just want to highlight a few changes that we added this year. So 5 items have been added. The stability in the supply chain, geopolitical situation was another risk, then product compliance, the IoT, Internet of Things, and software as a product. Then in trade compliance, it was basically violations of tariffs, and then the use of resources in terms of sustainability. So that was a recommendation of the auditors as well, that this risk universe shouldn't be static, but should develop or evolve dynamically. And if, from your perspective, certain risk factors are missing here, and you basically don't identify with this risk universe, please let us know, and we can talk about adding risks that are missing, in your opinion, to this risk universe. And then I'm already at a point where I'll hand over to Katharina, who will talk a bit about the process at the company level. So the process at the company level is something, of course, that concerns you. What we would like to show you here today is an analysis of the risks that you reported for 2024, and just the focus risks for 2024. So why have we never shown that to you in the past? Why are we showing this for the first time? We just wanted to show you that what you report to us is not something that only the EVP and the SVP look at. We analyze and assess your risk reports as well. And this is just an extract. I'm not going to go into great detail, but you can read up a bit about the focus risks. We are seeing information security is one of these focus risks. It's the top focus risks based on your reports, especially if we look at the valuation parameters here on the right. So we have this 1 to 4, very low, low, medium, and high. And you see here that information security basically ends up with a net risk of 128 million euros in the group. And that's, of course, very important for us. That's an important risk for us. And at the same time, we would like to go into greater detail. This is the influence or the impact of the measures on the overall risks reported by you. So you can see that especially the measures you have taken have a significant impact on your risk assessment. The better your measures are, the lower the remaining net risk is going to be for you and for us in the group reporting. So you can see here At the bottom, you see the gross valuation, so 1 to 4 is A to D, and on the left you see the net risk and the percentage change. So if we look at the top right, so after implementing measures, only 3.8% of the gross risks remain as a net risk in the D, so the high category. So 5% of gross risks can be downgraded from high to medium in the net risk assessment. And then roughly 20% can be reduced from medium to low, and more than 22% can be reduced from low to very low. So you see, this is what we do with your data. The better your data is, the better our analyses are, and that's something we can then take back into the board's risk management workshop and the annual report to the advisory board's audit committee. A very interesting topic, of course, for you is the focus risks that you need to take into account in your risk reporting cycle this year. So those of you who have been part of the process last year already know 5 of these current focus risks. That's emergency and crisis management, then information security, of course, inadequate sanctions list checks. That's something we worked on together with the compliance team, so there have been some additions. That's something that Clara Schlindwein will talk about later. Then there's the failure of power supply sources due to our dependence on fossil fuels, and the focus risk human rights and environmental risks in the supply chain. So these are the 5 risks you already know. There is a new risk, that's customs violations, insufficient compliance with customs regulations, and an inadequate customs organization in your companies. So that means that if you basically don't process the movement of goods properly with customs, if you don't clear something properly with customs, that can lead to penalties and to even criminal proceedings against your companies. But Clara Schlindwein will talk about that in greater detail. So for all those of you that are new to this process, focus risks have to be evaluated on the CIS. That's something you have to do. If the risk isn't relevant to you at all, you can just basically award a 1, and that will show that it's not relevant for your company. But focus risks will be included in the risk workshop of the board for all companies participating in the risk management process, which is why for us it has to be relevant for all companies. So this is just an external assessment from the World Economic Forum. They are conducting a risk survey among various groups of people, experts from the worlds of science, from the worlds of politics, public organizations, groups of companies. So 900 individuals are being surveyed by the World Economic Forum, and over the next 2 years and over the next 10 years they're seeing the following risks. And again, this is something we just wanted to share with you. The top is, of course, misinformation and disinformation, extreme weather events. We've seen that in the group as well. You're all familiar with that. But also, of course, armed conflicts between states, the increasing polarization of societies, cyber espionage and warfare. That's going to be a big problem in the next 2 years, according to experts. If we look at the long-term risks over the next 10 years, so the 2 years are basically, they do reflect our own risk assessment. they do reflect what you see in the next 24 months, but the outlook for the next 10 years is important as well. And we're seeing a shift. You can see it in the legend at the top. Green is environmental risks, and spots 1 to 4 are just environmental risks. So experts see those as the top risks over the next 10 years. Have a look at this list. Let's see whether something like this is relevant for you. And our request is, please use these external resources to be able to submit complete and concise risk reports to identify the risks that might apply to your companies over the next 24 months. On the next slide, we basically shared a self-check with you that you can do right away before you start with the risk management process. Ideally, you can do that once you have prepared your risk report to check whether you have covered all the potential risks and all the bases in the risk management cycle. So, did you update all the individual risks? Have you defined 3 individual risks in addition to the focus risks? That's standard, because there's always something specific to individual companies. And look at the risk universe. To do that, have a look at what other potential risks apply to your company's situation. And what's important, check the relevance of the risks that are already in your risk inventory. So outdated focus risks that used to be defined as a focus risks, they are basically transferred by the system automatically. But once they are no longer a focus risk on the CIS, you can delete them if they don't apply to your company. At the top, you see other or further effects. That's a new field that basically comes out of the new audit standard. So it's not only the quantitative analysis, but we also check whether a risk does have other qualitative effects on your company, such as a penalty, of course, or a fine, but also whether there's, for instance, business interruptions that cost money. You will see these terms on the CIS in the drop-down menus. So at the top, integrating functions. It's important that the risk report is not just submitted by you, the risk management, and your company management just basically nods that off. So the important thing is for you to integrate as many functions in your company as possible in this process to make sure that you have basically included all the risks. Maybe there are some compliance risks, so the company compliance officer might have some information, or quality risks or sustainability risks and so on. Then the risk owner. For every risk, a risk owner should be defined, ideally by name, or maybe by their position. They are responsible for this individual risk and, of course, for controlling the measures to counter this risk. At the top center, you see the risks watch list. So based on their relevance, you basically classify risks differently. So every gross risk rated as 3 or 4 is a top risk. That's a risk that we look at in the process, and those are the risks that we present to the EVPs and the SVPs as well. If you want to continue basically classifying risks below those classifications, that's not relevant for us at the group level, but you can use that, of course, for internal purposes to maintain your own risk watch list. Then there's the risk workshop. Our recommendation is conduct a risk workshop at least once a year together with the management and the first management level to make sure that there's wide awareness and a lot of experience at the company regarding risk management and evaluation of potential risks. At the top right, you see the different assessment steps. Of course, you need the potential losses, but they have to be realistic and they have to follow the assessment steps. So evaluate the amount of potential losses, then the probability of occurrence, and in addition, you will then evaluate the overall measures, and then you have the overall risk rating. So it's important to keep in mind what the probability of occurrence will be. Then There are ad hoc risks. So if something occurs throughout the year that you are reporting to us because they are relevant for risk management, please make sure that this can happen. Then measures. So you need to update measures together with the specific risk owner, check whether the measures are still up to date, whether they're still effective, whether they're still in place. Sometimes you have to delete outdated measures. So measures can only be effective if they have been implemented. So if you say you want to implement something 4 years from now, it cannot have an effect on your gross risk right away. Another point we have included here from the readiness checks we have just done in preparation for the final audit next year. That's deadlines and documentation of measures. So when you report measures to us in the risk management process, it might happen that you will get a question, please show us how you actually checked and assessed the effectiveness of an individual measure. Please show us that you actually implemented this individual measure. So that's something that's new. And the most important point is, Matthias Beck has already said it, basically you have to report all your risks in the CIS by the 30th of June. Then there's a visual self-check as well. On this risk inventory, we see a lot of risks being reported, and the potential losses are just classified as a 1. So these are all non-relevant risks. So there is a lack of process understanding on this risk assessment. So this company either identified the wrong risks, maybe outdated risks, maybe they didn't delete the focus risks, and they're not following the risk assessment process, looking only at the worst-case scenarios. Maybe they are already including measures or taking measures into account in the potential amount of loss. A positive example is this. The number of individual risks is okay, so at least 3, a few more if they are relevant. So relevant for us means at first glance that the potential amount of loss should be a 3 or a 4. So we can see that this company has understood the process. They are taking the right valuation steps. So these are just relevant individual risks plus the focus risks. And we have one risk here that has a 2, which is okay if you want to keep it on your own risk watch list. So that brings me from the companies to the topic of compliance, and I would like to hand over to Clara Schlindwein.
Thank you so much, Katharina, and both of you for having invited me here today and being able to present the focus risks in greater detail here today. As we already mentioned beforehand, we always have the possibility of having a risk workshop and looking and reporting focus risks also from the compliance sector to this workshop, namely things that could become problematic for the group, and we've forwarded and submitted 2. One is the EU sanction against Russia and Belarus, and the other one is this CSDDD, the EU Supply Chain Directive. Now, most of you will have already heard about this due to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. We have various sanction packages that we've experienced against Russia in order to exert political and economic pressure. And since the beginning of the year, we've already arrived at the 16th sanction package. And each package contains different elements that we need to comply with. I've listed some of them here for you, which concern us as a work group, that the embargo of specific persons, and the other one is export ban or partially even a transit ban for certain goods. And we have to check and read which goods are affected by this. And for example, you may have read that steel is affected by this. And then we focus on the other risks, the focus risks that were discussed beforehand. First of all, we need to comply with the respective sanctions, and you have to do this beforehand as a company, but due to the sanction packages, the importance of these aspects has increased tremendously. And the sanction lists also apply to persons. That's important to remember. And due to the integration of persons, the list of sanctions was expanded considerably. And within your company, you should really take a close look to see if you do it, and if so, how you do it. And in case of any questions, feel free to get in touch with the people from Worth Logistics, and we will be able to support you in this respect. And during the past weeks, we read quite frequently in the press that the customs policies of the United States have a tremendous effect here, and they have increased the risk considerably. For example, when it comes to the obligations regarding documentations, the colleagues will be all yours and able to support you. And we have increased due diligence obligations of the parent companies, which is the AWKG, vis-a-vis the subsidiaries in third countries. That's the so-called duty of care, which is also included in the current package. And there will be trainings on this topic in the near future. And Worth Logistics will inform you what you need to take into account. And then again, we have an obligation to implement a no Russia, no Belarus clause in the contracts. And all you should do is simply check whether you've included these in your contract. And you will find an example for the way to make up such a clause in the one pages of Worth Logistics. And for example, this is an overview. You see the concrete obligations that we as the Worth Group have with respect to the sanctions, and you have the information where the letters of the management are saved. Another important aspect is the CSDDD. There were some changes here at the beginning of this year, the so-called Omnibus Initiative, because we saw that on the EU level the regulations are ever increasing, which consequently hampers competitiveness, and this is something that we wish to fight against. And therefore, we have increased our efforts by also suggesting the omnibus approach. And we have the, for example, various aspects here, the CSRD, CSDDD, the EU taxonomy, and the CBAM. And, for example, the EU deforestation regulations may be something that you are familiar with. That's in the square box below, and there may not be any changes here. And allow me to speak in greater detail about the CSDDD here. Presumably, the situation will be that from the 1st of January 2028, the first companies will be affected by it. So we have some time that we've gained in order to implement these aspects. In the CSDDD as such, the entire supply chain had to be considered, and now it only focuses on the direct business partners, similar to the German supply chain management law. And you have no obligation to terminate a contract if the stipulations are not complied with. In the Omnibus Group, we have the description of the involvement, for example, of stakeholders. Not all of them have to be incorporated again, and the monitoring, by the way, is shifted from every 12 months to every 5 years, and certain liability is also taken out of it. In this respect, we would like to mention the fact that we cooperate with the colleagues from the sustainability team to further implement this, because postponing it doesn't mean we don't have to do it. And the 1 year that we gain by the modification will pass quickly, And for this very reason, so you should not sit back and relax. We will get in touch with you as time goes by and inform you about the next step that should be taken. And the topics that I presented today, you will also find in the compliance questionnaire. So again, the comment, if you fill in the CIS query, and don't forget to also fill in the questionnaire. That's very important. We need your feedback. And in doing so, please ensure that you cooperate with the respective parties involved. For example, the sanctions. If your vendor is not involved too much, then you can make sure and get the respective person on board to support you in this. Thank you, sir, very much, Clara. That was a great input, as always. A good comment regarding the current focus risks. And here again, I would like to emphasize the fact that during the past years, we've intensified our cooperation, and you're always part and parcel of the risk workshop of the senior management. And I'm already one step ahead talking about Luis, and I'm going to raise the compliance flag, and well, that really proved successful. So again, thanks so much for your input today. And now we can make a perfect transition now. We stopped talking about the topic by mentioning sustainability, and this is Luis's job now to continue along this line. During the past years, we've moved closer together from a contextual point of view, and things are really a perfect match because compliance, sustainability, risk management are so closely linked with one another, and taking individual approaches, that simply doesn't make any sense. It's a mutual effort that we need to take. So, also most cordial welcome on my behalf, and I'm really happy to be with you today and speak about the topic of sustainability and primarily the risks of sustainability. I already had this chart last year, but I'd like to repeat things just to make sure. For the sustainability aspect, we have 3 transformation areas for the work group. One is the climate. It's the emissions that we produce need to be reduced. Then we have the next is the material life cycles, where the idea is to decouple ending resources or limited resources and reuse them in cycles. So if our resources are dwindling, we need alternatives so that we can continue growing also in the future. And last not least, the 3rd transformation area are social standards. And this basically follows up right to the previous topic. The idea here is to ensure social and environmental standards in the supply chain and leave nobody behind, neither human beings nor regions. So in analogy to the 3 transformation areas, we've also embedded the risk in the risk universe. Well, this is nothing new. We've already had this last year. And 2 of these are focus risks that I would like to touch upon in greater detail. One, with respect to the climatic change, the focus risk is energy supply. So what does this mean? We largely depend on fossil energy carriers, be it oil, be it gas. And the idea behind this is there a risk in energy supply due to these dependencies, price fluctuation, or are there any general supply risks associated with it? Or maybe it does make sense to look for alternatives and to get a broader basis. The second focus risks are the risks regarding human rights and environmental risks in the supply chain. So that takes up the topic that we spoke about before, the CSDDD, the supply chain management law of the European Union, that deals exactly with this, not with the law as such, but with the risks which the law wants to secure. In other words, are there potential violations of human rights or environmental risks in our supply chain? What about transparency? Is everything transparent? For example, if you say, no problem for me, we've carried out risk analysis, or on the other extreme is, I don't know the risks. So we have the compliance aspect also taken into account. We briefly spoke about the supply chain law. And when it comes to sustainability, there are a lot of more regulations that we'll be seeing in the future. And one I would like to touch upon very briefly. This is the so-called CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which basically is the EU directive on reporting on sustainability aspects. Why do I speak about this now? Well, you can read up what this means, but I would like to touch upon this very briefly only. It's an expanded reporting, and in addition to our sustainability and competitiveness report, we have additional aspects that need to be taken into account. And in this context, there are increased requirements that we need to speak about the risks associated with sustainability. All this is also audited externally by our auditors, and it will be integrated into the situation report. All these details that are important here, what we've decided as the work group will be that we will report in conformity with CSRD as of next year. One important aspect is the essentialness analysis. So we only need to talk about the essential aspect. That's what's behind this term. So it's a dual analysis which takes into account two perspectives. One, the impact materialities, which is the inside-out perspective, and this means which positive, negative impacts do we have on our environment or on society as such. And the other is the financial materiality, that is to say the outside-in perspective. What are the effects, the impacts from a financial point of view do we see? What are the financial risks and opportunities, in other words? And that's the catchword here. We also talk about risks in conjunction with sustainability, and we speak about IROs, impact, risk, and opportunities, that is to say positive or negative effects. So the probability of the impact regarding financial risks and opportunities. This materiality analysis are included in the sustainability analysis with the support from the companies by the sustainability managers of the companies. And for this, we had a process in place how the sustainability managers in the companies should approach this aspect. And I would just like to briefly talk about this. So it's just as important as assessing the risks, but not separate from the sustainability analysis. No, we should do this together with the respective functions. So instead of number 3, we have the risk management listed here, which is an important stakeholder and an important contact when it comes to the evaluation of risks. Now, it goes without saying that we would also like to include our sustainability parameters here, and we've requested the sustainability managers to also make use of the information that they submit in the CIS, so that we can get all the information, the two different types of information together here. That's really important. So what do we evaluate when it comes to risks and opportunities? Well, the idea here is to be able to evaluate the potential risks and impact of the risks and opportunities and the origin. And when it comes to the sustainability analysis, we also look at an extended time frame, not only 24 months, but rather further long on medium term. So if we look into the future, as we've seen before, the environmental risks are moving upwards on the priority list. And it is very important to also look into the future. So why do we do all this with respect to sustainability, although we already have risk management in place? Well, if you look at this chart, you will have a simple answer. This is the number of sustainability aspects that we need to evaluate for our impact and effects that we have, but also for the risks and opportunities that may arise from these. The number is quite high, and if we would take each individual number and include it in the risk analysis, a number that may not be relevant at all for us, then it's a huge questionnaire that everybody would have to fill in. That would definitely not be as profitable as a somewhat reduced question. That's why we do it in a regular cycle in the framework of the sustainability management, because we have the expertise required here. So this year we performed this for the first time based on the new standards, and we also have preliminary results available. And I'm very happy that we were able to involve 60 companies covering 20 countries already. And this accounts for around about 75% of our sales within the group. And depending on the business segment, we've prepared these accordingly so that they're already available in Group Connect. But they're not finalized yet, just to make sure that you are aware of that. So, and I would like to thank all those of you who've participated in this. And for reasons of transparency, allow me to briefly speak about the major risks and opportunities that we've encountered, because the right and the left side should somehow match. When it comes to the risks, I will not read all of these, but we have fines and increasing costs regarding the climate. We have the adaptability of our technologies. We have fluctuating energy prices included at the very top, which basically reflects the focus risk that we saw beforehand. And when it comes to resources, we have shortages, stricter regulations, fluctuating raw materials prices, and when it comes to the social aspects, we have data protection violations as a tremendous risk, which is not an explicit sustainability risk, and it was not included as such in the risk universe. But it nevertheless exists. Well, opportunities are also there, which is somewhat more compact, because when it comes to risk management, we usually speak about the missed opportunities. But here the idea is to have access to green financing instruments, to ensure an ongoing education for our employees. Diversity was identified as an opportunity, and the attraction of talents, and naturally, generally, the stability of the enterprise as a whole. So there are distinctly more risks and opportunities that came out of our evaluation, but I just would like to give you a brief overview and get you an impression that these aspects need to be taken into account and should be taken into account in your risk evaluation, and that the sustainability managers should be looking into this. And that's why I would like to share with you the list. Feel free to look into this list after the presentation, because I would like to ask you to take a proactive approach. If there is a sustainability topic on this list where you say, oh, well, that could be a risk for me, then I would kindly request you to report this in the risk assessment in the CIS, because there we have the possibility of entering and inputting risks that we haven't seen yet, because that would be a very valuable support for us and a very important support for us, to see that we can match the things up and that we have a complete list, at least as complete as possible. So thanks for your attention, and we'll look into the questions later on. Thank you. That was just perfect. I like this chart. But maybe if we go one chart back, what I also think is the risks that we've identified in the context of the sustainability and the materiality analysis, I think it's well worth talking about. That could evolve into a focus risk in the future. Or if we look, for example, at companies where we believe that this risk has really manifested itself, then we should check if it's included in the risk list of the respective company. So it's not only that we are having a joint event here, a joint presentation. No, we're talking about the contents also. That is really essential. And at the very end, I would like to share with you an outlook. It's not an adjusted approach, but we're talking about dangers of nature, catastrophes. So that makes reference to what Katharina has reported already, that the further you look into the future, the more will the climatic risks play a role. And that is not only true theoretically, no, that is true already today. If we look around, if we look into the work group throughout the world, then last year we had 4 major events where Earth companies suffered from hailstorms and floods, where we experienced massive damages and interruptions of our operation. The biggest case here was, and that's not a secret, it was with Worth Austria, where the entire site was flooded and the company was subject to restrictions of its ability to deliver products for a certain period of time. So we considered how we as a group can improve in this respect. How can we better identify the risks? How can we narrow down these risks and evaluate them? We have various measures that are implemented in this respect. One will be that you will receive a letter from the group management in the near future, where you will be given a checklist and requested, particularly in the field of floods and similar, to check and evaluate how endangered your site is. That's one of the measures. Another measure is that we at corporate headquarters purchased a risk modulation tool where we can model all sites worldwide based on the dangers that occurred at specific sites in the past, and taking into account the different climatic scenarios, how these individual sites will evolve over time. And here you can see a screenshot of a map generated here, and what you see here are the worth sites, and the more red you see, the more endangered is the respective site. That's one thing that we can do. The other is we can do such an evaluation dependent on the values insured there. The diagram here shows you the individual companies, and in the right-hand upper area, that is the red square, we see a combination of a high danger by natural impact with a high risk. On the right-hand scale, you see in a decreasing order the different sites. So today we can already say on the basis of this information that this specific site with the highest number is the most endangered. And we will make use of this chart when we try, together with you, be more resilient and become more resilient at our individual sites, and to adopt additional protection measures in order to improve the situation. But that's only one aspect. The other aspect is that with future investments, we will apply the very same logics to verify how endangered a new site is, taking into account the current climates and the development of natural disasters. So for you, that means if you think of building a new warehouse or a new production facility, then before you do this, in the phase when you still do the strategic evaluation, you can tell us where the site will be, and we can play this site into our system and tell you how endangered this specific site would be. And that's the report we will generate and send to you. On the left column, you see the individual risks. That's, for example, fluvial floods or extreme precipitation, storm surges, hailstorm, etc. And the column next to it, you see how high the respective risks are evaluated for a specific site by our tool. And the right-hand columns, with the years, you see how these hazards will evolve in the future. And this gives you a very good indication that at which aspects you have to take a close look. For example, do I have a high risk this year already when it comes to extreme precipitation? And will it increase in the future? So for a specific site, this means that if you have large roof areas, then you naturally must ensure that you have a drainage system for the surface water that you experience at a specific site. So this chart gives you a very good indication of the situation that you will encounter in the future. And if you have any questions about a specific site and you would like this information, then please get in touch with us. That was one thing I would like to mention. And now a brief outlook at what will occupy us in the month to come in 2025 and 2026. Currently, we are in the process of rolling out the new process on a company level. So we've started at the top, and we'll get the EVPs and SVPs on board next. And hopefully with the annual accounts in 2025, 2026, we will get the respective information on the risk assessment and evaluation process. In parallel, we have the assessments by the EVPs and SVPs carried out, and we accompany the respective status appointments of the senior management and check the degree of maturity as things evolve. And in the future, that is to say, already at the end of May this year, on our new group communication platform, Group Connect, we will be represented as well. There will be one page where you can access all the information that we've talked about today. So we basically moved from the Worth Group Connect to the new Group Connect. And that was basically it. So when I look at the time frame, we have 3 to 4 more minutes left for any questions that you may have. Currently, there are no questions in the chat, but we would give you the opportunity now. If you would have some spontaneous questions during the next few minutes, you can switch on your camera and then ask us the questions directly.